at 1 o'clock thinking we were supposed to start at that time. There was no one here, and I thought, oh, isn't it lovely? I can go back to bed. I suppose you are all aware of what the material is going to be in bringing up parents. But the vision of Baha'u'llah's world order with a unified, peaceful society, as the Universal House of Justice pointed out in the Rizwan message, is very dim. And obviously, it implies profound and basic changes in everything in this life, particularly in our lives. We, as Baha'is, are a little bit like the story of Trisham Organum, where the father and his son were going through the desert with a horse and cart. And the father was trying to project his thoughts to the son and show him how things were going to improve in the future and what they would be like. And he said the cart will be very, very long, and there will be 20 horses or 25 horses in the front of it. What he didn't realize or didn't foresee is that the horses would be in an engine or a motor. And we are somewhat, in that respect, the same as we look forward to the future. We know that there is going to be many changes, but we don't quite see them. But we have the keys to changing them right now. And the sooner we start, the sooner we will be able to bring about the world order. Now, I think everyone will agree we see on every side decadence and immorality, low standards in government and education and what is called religion, and every area of life is confusion. I started a personal boycott once upon a time, a number of years ago, when I first heard some product that was speaking derogatorily against another product of the same kind. And I wouldn't buy that product. But now, if I did, if I didn't buy a product that was talking against another product, I wouldn't eat, sleep, or wear anything, because it is such a strange kind of phenomenon that has taken place. Years ago, this was not allowable on radio, but television seems to be freer than that. I was on pilgrimage in 1953. The beloved guardian said at that time that the downfall of civilization had already begun, and that it was a spiritual thing as well as a physical. In the writings, he said, from the writings we understand what is going to happen, but we can also even go back to the Bible or the Quran and see what is said about this time. He said there are two great plans at work in the world, the major plan and the minor plan. That the major plan had to do with chaos, confusion, wars, revolutions, all that kind of confusion and chaos. And the minor plan was whatever plan came out of the world center for the Baha'is to fulfill. He said that the major plan, the purpose of the major plan, was to bring mankind to its knees so it would accept Baha'u'llah. This was the purpose of all of these things happening in the world. But that the Baha'is should not be concerned about any of these things. That their complete and undivided focus should be on whatever plan is going on at that time that came from the world center. He said that if we do this, and we are doing the very best that we can in our efforts in this direction, we should not be concerned, because whatever happens as a result of that would be the will of God, and we must not worry about anything like that. When Mr. Sears was on pilgrimage, the beloved guardian said that if the Baha'is were to look around the world and see what the people in the world were doing, and do just about the opposite, they would be doing the Baha'i thing. Then when I was on pilgrimage, we were on pilgrimage 2 different years apart. He said that we should leave the cities, go to the villages. He said, go to the villages, not only for our spiritual protection, but for our physical protection as well. Being human, God gave us a free will. I often think that that was an indication of his sense of humor. But yeah, what's free about it is difficult to understand. There really is very little choice, is there? But we have the choice to turn to him or away from him. But he says, if we choose wrongly, we can expect to suffer the consequences. There you go. Our aim now, as parents, must be first to help our children to understand spiritual principles. In this day, more than any other day. First of all, for their welfare. Secondly, for their happiness. And third, for their future lives in this world and in the next. Warmer in here than I thought. My glasses are sliding down my nose all the time. Baha'u'llah tells us that no one has discrimination. Isn't that an interesting thought? No one has discrimination. That means the Baha'is, the non-Baha'is throughout the entire world. No one has discrimination unless they know the writings of Baha'u'llah, the Word of God for today. That is a very, very powerful statement, because discrimination means we don't know the difference between right and wrong unless we know Baha'u'llah's writings. Our son Bill Jr. was a pioneer in South Africa and later in Uruguay and then in Ecuador. And while he was in Uruguay, he wrote us a letter. The purpose of it was to thank us for encouraging him to pioneer. He said he would never have been anything but a Baha'i, but he didn't realize the necessity of teaching until he went pioneering. And then he made a very interesting comment at the end of the letter. He said that the children of many Baha'is do not become Baha'is or do not become active in the faith. And he said he thought that the reason for this was that the parents did not consider the children contacts. And this, I thought this was a rather astute observation that he had made, and a very interesting one. If we consider our children contacts, we will treat them entirely differently, won't we, than we might if we did not. Now, some parents have said that they would not teach their children about the faith until they became 15, and then they could decide what religion they wanted to become. And Mr. Fazey, the Hand of the Cause, answered this by saying, how can they then decide when they have no basis for something on which to decide? Then the point follows that these same parents wouldn't keep from their children their secular education, would they? It would be impossible for them to think in terms of keeping that education away from them, and yet that secular education is for this life, this world, this time, and not for all time in the future. So the important thing is the spiritual education that they have. Being able to add 2 and 2 does not bring eternal life. Abdu'l-Baha said, it is extremely difficult to teach the individual and refine his character once puberty is past. By then, as experience has shown, even if every effort be exerted to modify some tendency of his, it all availeth nothing. He may perhaps improve somewhat today, but let a few days pass, and he forgetteth and turneth backward to the habitual condition and accustomed ways. Therefore it is in early childhood that a firm foundation must be laid. My father had a 4th grade education, and we had lunch with a friend one day, and this friend had a PhD, and he asked my father where he had received his degrees. And my father picked up the gleanings, and he said, "This is where my degrees have come from." And I'm in somewhat the same position. I'm not an expert in this field. What I have learned from studying the writings. And any one of you might have done as good or better than I am doing, but hopefully maybe some facet of the gem may be turned your way that you didn't see before. But we have to have a discussion on how to improve ourselves in order to improve our children. If we look carefully at ourselves, we have to see how we measure up to the Baha'i standard. And we have to do it with very careful analysis. To do this effectively, we might consider hidden word number 31 in the Arabic, which tells us to examine our lives daily. Now, Abdu'l-Baha said that children should be taught to do this, to examine their lives, and then to pray that the things that they have done that were good, that God would increase, and the things that they had done that were not, God would help them to overcome. Oh, the hidden words, Abdu'l-Baha went on to say it in other places, are not to be read, they are to be lived. And this is for all of us, not merely for the children. Abdu'l-Baha said that children who were trained to do this, it would increase their love of Baha'u'llah, and it would affect their lives through this world and through the next. Now, we can't, it used to say, people used to tell the children, don't do as I say, don't do as I do as I say. We can't do that anymore. It doesn't work, because what the children see in our lives, they are going to do in theirs. They are not going to do any differently. And if they see a lack of love in the home, if they hear gossip, if there is no study, no prayer time together as a family, if people go to feast only on occasion, and contributing to the fun is an afterthought, if they feel racial discrimination, and on and on and on, you can add any number of things you want, they are going to follow in this same pattern. There are few cases, fortunately, among the Baha'is where drugs and alcohol affect the family, but even there are some of those. But whatever it is, the children will follow in the pattern that is set by the parents. But that's rather scary, isn't it? That means we have to be very, very careful and watch our footsteps very carefully. I believe that to avoid this kind of condition, we have to begin way, way back, before marriage even, certainly before children. And it's easy to see why so much stress is placed by Abdu'l-Baha on the mother of the family, her spirituality and her responsibility. But a major point, or probably the major point, is never to allow one's love for God to be superseded by love for anyone else. If we do, we're in trouble right from the very beginning. Abdu'l-Baha wrote, when either of the two, husband or wife, adoreth the other to the exclusion of God, then each will prevent the other from entering into the kingdom of God. This is a very, very vital, vital point. I don't think that I'm not saying this as an example, but when Mr. Sears asked me to marry him, I said, you have to remember the Baha'i faith is first and you are second. And this is exactly the way it has to be in all of our lives. When it is that way, we are on the right path. When it is not, we're going to have problems. Another thought for consideration is to think of what we have brought from the past into the Baha'i faith. Now, I was brought up a Roman Catholic, so this idea of examining my life each night is a very, very habitual thing, because Catholics are taught to make an act of contrition every night before they go to sleep, because in case they die in the night, they'll go straight up and get that harp or what, feathery wings or whatever else you get up there. That's fanciful, though. It's a good thing we got over that, isn't it? Anyway, this thought, we have so many traditions and mores and ideas and prejudices that we bring with us, and we insert them into the Baha'i faith. Not by any intent, but by just because it's habit. For instance, we are accustomed to hearing the phrase, man has a soul. Man doesn't have a soul. Don't you know that? Man is a soul. He has a body. That body is for a temporary period of what? 60, 70, 80 years. I tell you, when it gets to this point, it gets awful tiresome, too. Nevertheless, man is a soul and has a body which is a temporary thing for an experience while he is here for a purpose of the future. That's the purpose of why he has it. Every child has a body and a soul. And the parents are physically responsible for that child, or they are responsible for the physical part of that child. But the soul that accompanies that child's body was selected by God, we are told. And he selected that soul to accompany that body because that particular race, that particular country, that particular economic situation, that particularly pair of parents were going to be best suited for its spiritual development, for the future, for the next world. That is why we have the opportunity to do the thing that the child must need to be fulfilled. It is not our child. It is God's child. We are merely taking care of it for the time being. That treasure of God, that soul, God chose to accompany that body, is given to us, the parents, to love, to nurture, but before all else, to teach the spiritual teachings, primarily to know, to love, and to serve God, and to prepare its characteristics so that when it goes into the next world, it is a fulfilled soul. It is not going in an empty one. That trust is given to us by God. I was surprised the other day in reading a newspaper, and incidentally, I collect newspaper articles on subjects, and there are a whole bunch of articles on this bench over here. If any of you would like to look through them and take them, you're welcome to. That's what they're there for. They're all interesting articles on the subject of parents, and many of them, it's so interesting to see how gradually things are getting into this realm of Baha'i thinking. Very, very all along the way. It's very interesting. But I was very surprised and gratified the other day to see a survey that was made among women. This was in a Sunday paper. And the question was, what is the most desirable job that women would like today? What do you think it was?
Being a mother. Being a mother.
Homemaker. Can you imagine? I thought, we are finally making progress. Today, in many circles, the word housewife has become almost like a swear word and derogatory in nature. And mother has reached somewhat the same level, but yet Abdu'l-Baha said of women, every woman who becometh the maidservant of God outshineth in glory the empresses of the world, for she is related to God, and her sovereignty is everlasting, whereas a handful of dust will obliterate the name and fame of those empresses. In other words, as soon as they go down to the grave, they are reduced to naught. He also wrote, mothers are the first educators, the first mentors, and a mentor is a wise and trusted counselor, and it is the mother who determines the happiness, the future greatness, the courteous ways, and learning, and judgment, the understanding, and the faith of their little ones. There's hardly anything left, is there? We had a visitor working in our area, and he didn't come to visit us, he came to visit someone else. He came to visit a friend who had apnea. I don't know if you're familiar with this disease. It's a very, very strange one. And anyway, he told us that scientific research had discovered that 25,000 children in the United States, it's North America, die every year from apnea. This is commonly called crib death. And what happens is that while they are asleep, their breathing becomes more shallow and more shallow and more shallow until they stop breathing and they die. It's as simple as that. And he said that in countries where the mother carries the child either in the front or, as in many countries, on the back, or the father carries the child, that this is unheard of. But that it takes 3 years for a child to regulate its breathing. And the only way it can do it is through that close association with the parent. Isn't that interesting? I also learned that monkeys have this same problem. But in the Bible, in Deuteronomy, it says, I command you this day to love the Lord your God and serve him with all your heart and soul. Lay up these words in your heart and in your soul. Ye shall teach them to your children when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up with them. That's rather reminiscent of a prayer of God, isn't it? At least it reminded me of it. Another statistic that this doctor gave us when he was visiting was that separation between parents and divorce almost always brings about an immediate drop in a child's IQ, from 20% to as low as 50% lower than it was previous to that. And I attended the Grand Canyon Conference last year in Phoenix, and a lady spoke on this subject, and she said that statistically, divorce was higher among the Baha'is than it was among them in the non-Baha'i world. That's a strange, strange comment, isn't it? When our purpose is unity and the development of a united world. As the beloved guardian said, we are truly children of the half-light yet. One of my teachers in the faith was Dr. Genevieve Coy. Maybe many of you knew her. She was author of the book Counsels of Perfection, which she very kindly dedicated to Mr. Sears and myself. She was a psychologist, and she had met Abdu'l-Baha, and to my way of thinking, she truly exemplified the teachings as Abdu'l-Baha lived them. One of the things about her was that she knew my faults, but she loved me anyway, which is a very satisfying experience, I can assure you. And unless you've had the experience, you wouldn't know about it. But another time that I had this same feeling was when I was in the presence of Shoghi Effendi in 1953. It seemed that the beloved guardian could see through us. He knew everything about us. But he was able to do as Abdu'l-Baha said, to look at the good and forget everything else. And that too was an extremely satisfying experience. And he surrounded the pilgrims with this kind of love that made you feel like you were sitting on top of the world in the best sense. He truly followed that injunction of Abdu'l-Baha, who said, you know, if a person has 10 good qualities and 1 bad, look at the 10 good and forget the 1. And if he has 1 good and 10 bad, look at the 1 and forget the 10. And as I was leaving Haifa for that time, I thought, if I and the Baha'is of the world were to immediately put into effect this injunction in our lives, we would change the world in a very, very short space of time. It would be a wonderful thing to do. But to get back to Dr. Coy, she often gave courses on the similarities between the teachings of scientific study of psychology and the Baha'i writings, and she would show how they proved one another. And one of her favorites was talking about children. And in that, she always said that by the time a child is 5, it has already developed all of its characteristics. And that this certainly coincided with Abdu'l-Baha's statement that the mother should not leave the child until it is 5 years of age, and it should be with it constantly. Today, too often, child's care, even in infancy, is daily put into a non-Baha'i atmosphere, a non-Baha'i environment, and it loses the connection for many, many hours, and it also often loses the spirit. And this can never be replaced. I found something that is kind of amusing and not so funny, but it's titled, How to Raise a Delinquent in 10 Easy Lessons. Begin in infancy to give the child everything he wants. In this way, he will grow up to believe that the world owes him a living. When he picks up bad words, laugh at him. This will make him think he's cute. Never give him any spiritual training. Wait until he is 21 and let him decide for himself. Pick up everything he leaves lying around, books, shoes, clothes. Do everything for him so that he will be experienced in throwing all responsibility on others. Quarrel frequently in his presence. In this way, he will not be too shocked when the house is broken up later. Give a child all the spending money he wants. Never let him earn his own. Why should he have things as tough as you have them? Satisfy his every craving for food, drink, and comfort. Denial may lead to harmful frustrations. Take his part against neighbors, teachers, and policemen. They are all prejudiced against your child. When he gets into real trouble, apologize for yourself by saying, I never could do anything with him. And number 10, prepare for a life of grief. You are bound to have it. But this is supposed to be a workshop. So you have to do some work. You know, I expected about 15 people in here. So you have to let me know if you want to say something in the back of the room. Each one of these questions we want to find answers for are points Abdu'l-Baha has made in relation to bringing up children. First of all, Chris, do you write clearly? Do you want to put the answers down when they come? Hopefully, a lot of them will come. No, don't, because we haven't got enough room. What is the most important quality that we must help our children develop?
Truthfulness. Truthfulness.
Truthfulness? What? I'm sorry.
Spiritual.
Oh, yes. What kind of virtue?
Courtesy.
Courtesy.
Respect and reverence.
Love of God.
Now, which is the most important of those?
The last one.
Courtesy.
Love God and truthfulness.
Why? Tony?
If you don't have truthfulness, you lose all your other good qualities. That's the foundation of all virtues.
Truthfulness is the foundation of all virtues, and Abdu'l-Baha points out that if we do not have truthfulness in our lives, we cannot develop any other spiritual characteristic. Yes?
You mean honesty, but you say truthfulness?
Yes, you have to do something. Truthfulness certainly doesn't mean just my talking to you and telling you a lie. It means truthfulness in all of our dealings with other people, truthfulness with ourselves, and certainly truthfulness with God. It is a matter of, it isn't something that we can refine minutely. It is something that each person has to develop within himself and find the answer to his own satisfaction. But unless we have truthfulness, we cannot develop any other spiritual characteristic. And then Abdu'l-Baha tells us to teach our children fear of God. Now, why would we teach our children fear of God?
If they don't fear God, they're not going to obey their parents either.
That's one of the reasons. They won't obey their parents. Consequences. Yes,
You said that those that don't fear God are not trustworthy.
that's true. Not untrustworthy. You do write well, but your spelling's a little fuzzy. She's part Persian and she spells phonetically. That's fine. What else? Why else would we teach our children to fear God?
To understand that there are laws that govern the inner being, and that by disobeying these laws work against one, so there must be fear against doing wrong.
Fear against doing wrong.
If they don't have a desire to please God, then they're going to be self-gratification.
Yes. this isn't what Abdu'l-Baha indicates at all. I think that's, oh, you need to write down for that one. Thank you. Abdu'l-Baha says that we teach children fear of God for their protection. This is it puts the entire thought in a whole new category, doesn't it? But if they understand that disobeying God is wrong, they will be protected from doing the wrong things. This is their protection. It is not something that is negative. It is not something that is bad. It is something that is positive, good, and very wonderful, and it is for their protection. Now, this is one that, now, any of these questions, and I hope that if you are at all interested in this subject and you would like to do something of this sort when you get home and take it to your assemblies and to your deepening classes, make up a whole series of questions from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha on the subject of bringing up children, and it's you can find all kinds of interesting things to have discussions on. This is one that I felt very few people in this part of the world give any thought to. Abdu'l-Baha says and advises that we must accustom our children to hardship. Now, how can we do that? What can we do to accustom our children to hardship?
Material.
Oh, yes. Anything more specific? That's interesting, because the first thing people usually say is, turn off the television set. Material denial. Yes.
Or exposing them to the reality sometimes. Not shielding.
Yes.
I think a good one would be to take them international travel teaching to third world countries.
Great.
Any donations?
Pardon?
I'd love to, any donations.
Yeah, international travel teaching. That's a wonderful, wonderful way. And they would probably find that these weren't hardships, but they were tremendous bounties. At least that's the way I would think of it. Yes,
I
please.
always thought, having them work toward that point in college is part time.
That's right.
And,
Yes.
not only that, as the child
Earn.
do with us, she has to earn her allowance
Yes.
by
Yes.
point system.
What else? Yes.
When there's financial difficulty in the family, the recent consultation with children are made aware of the financial difficulties, especially living in America where everything is so abundant.
Right. Consultation and problems. This could be for any problem. Yes. When Billy and Michael were little, we instituted this in our home. Every week we had a period of consultation, and they were encouraged to say what they didn't like as well as what they did like. And I think it made a great deal of difference in our ability to have a unity in the family. It was very helpful. What other ways can we accustom our children to hardship? Yes?
This goes along with consultation, but teach them to make choices and live with their choices.
Yes. And the right choices.
Right.
Yes.
Share their possessions.
Mm-hmm. That's I have heard people say, insist that they go to feast, but that shouldn't be a hardship. That should be a bounty. And also contribute to the fund. That also should be a bounty. Anybody else? Yes.
Don't shield them when they have problems.
Just let them work their problems. All of the various disciplines within the faith help them to consider them as a bounty when they acquire the disciplines, the spiritual disciplines. Any other ideas? You'll think of some more as time goes on, I'm sure. All right. how can we convince our children, and this is a difficult one very often, that the world order of Baha'u'llah that we are building is not going to be anything like the world we see around us today. How can we help them to understand this? Yes,
One way is bringing them to conferences that are very loving. They can get a feeling of what the world will be like in the future.
Yes. Travel teaching. Yes.
Make your home a vision from the outside to the world.
Yes, yes, make your home a reflection of what the world order will be.
Get them to think independently so they are free of all accepted thoughts of the day.
I'm sorry.
Get them to think independently so they are free of accepted thoughts.
Yes, yes.
Also, I find that teaching children to give speeches about the high ideal of the faith makes them feel more identified with the concept,
Yes.
with the perspective.
Mhm. I have a quotation that we'll read later on this subject. Yes, please.
Keep them home on holy days.
Keep what?
Don't let them go to school on holy days.
Very, yes, yes, very, very important. Not only for them, but for the entire community. This is very important. Yes.
I think it's important to show them how society today is reflecting what's written in the writings, so that the writings aren't, so that you deal with the writings, but you also bring in what's happening in society, talk about what's happening in the world, educate them as far as what's happening today, and then you refer back to the writings to show that it is not separate, that this fits, and this is what's happening. So that they
Can you give us an example of what you're saying? Because what I'm hearing is something different than what I'm thinking.
Oh, okay. If there are world events taking place, or I guess the best way to kind of think of the best way to say this, like for myself, like the study of history in a secular sense, and then going back to the writings and finding the places that it fits, that things correlate with each other. So it helps to not just read the writings separately, but it also helps me to see how it's reflected in my daily life when I go out there and I'm dealing with people, why the world is the way it is, and how it deals with me. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
You're saying
Does
something.
anybody get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yes.
I was going to say something, the same thing. As we see Baha'i principles taking root in the world, point that out to our children and say, this is why it's happening.
The positive things, you mean?
Right.
I think we have to do both, the positive and the negative. Jack?
Well, the Guardian has written a beautiful panoramic view of the future.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly for teenagers, it's nice to get them to sit down and consult on each little fragment of that.
Yes.
Because you get this beautiful view of the world.
Is this from the Advent? Yes.
This is an example of it, but reading the book Marxism and the Baha'i Faith, it's just education, but teaching them the specifics so they know that sometimes the world order of Baha'u'llah, to me at first, it seemed a lot like socialism, seemed like things that had happened before. But the more I knew, the more I could tell the difference between them. And so, to know how the Baha'i faith is different from old ideas that haven't worked. Try and write that one down.
Right. Good and bad. And then this is one that I think is sometimes difficult for even Baha'is to deal with, even though it shouldn't be. And that is, how can we help our children to realize that death is a messenger of joy? Pardon? What's the difference?
Have a good attitude about it ourselves.
Yes, a positive attitude.
She said that the pupa changes to the butterfly, but the butterfly never, pupa never exists after the butterfly.
That's a nice example. Once upon a time, we were pioneering in Mississippi, and I was invited to the funeral of a baby in a little Negro church, and the minister gave a beautiful sermon, and he said, in God's garden there are many flowers, and many of them are full-blown, and many of them are part-blown, but oftentimes God chooses a bud, and in this case he had chosen a bud for his garden. I thought that was so lovely. I've never forgotten it. But how can we help our children to realize one of the things that nobody has mentioned yet? That's very important. Yes.
Pray for the people that are passed on.
Yes, that's a very good point. Yes?
Talk about the words of God. Just try to bring it to their attention that this world is just part of the words of God.
That's the important thing. That this is a temporary existence that we are in. It is not the be-all and end-all. That this is our school for, we have a friend in Arizona who lost a child not rather recently, but he's been accustomed when he hears someone has passed on, he said, who graduated? It's rather a nice way of putting it, I think. Anyone else have a thought? Is there a hand up back there, or are you holding the door open? Yes. Yes.
Yes, allows a child, preferably a young child, between ages about 4 and 8 years old, to choose a pet to raise.
A pet?
They'll be able to learn responsibility. And secondly, they'll have to learn with, the tech passing on to them.
Yes. Yes.
My oldest is 5 and has recently been real concerned with this. And we discussed it as the life in the womb being one world they didn't want to leave because they were afraid of what was on the other side. And in being born, they found a better place. And then in death, even though they don't look forward to it, they will also be reborn into a better world, even though they don't know what it holds yet.
And neither one of you have a choice, do you?
Yeah, but she accepted that.
And the last one is, how can we encourage our children to have as role models the heroes and the heroines of our faith?
Exposing the truth through the writing.
Right.
So listen to Mr. Sears reading stories from Don
That's the beginning, isn't it? Yes, that's a very nice one. Yes.
It's not only heroes and heroines of the faith that we have that have lived back in God's great times, but we know of heroes and heroines that we live around today. People in our own Baha'i community. Examples, really, really examples. It doesn't have to be somebody of the historic version that
True.
we relate to. It can be somebody that we know of.
Yes. Anyone else? Yes.
I often ask my daughter what great and noble things she has done, in the same vein as heroines and heroes. Great and noble, they are known for great and noble things. So that, as in parallel to her life, that she is capable of doing them as well.
Yes. A long time ago, we were on the radio committee for the United States, the National Radio Committee. And at that time, there were only a couple of television stations. But we had put out a plea to a number of people all over the United States to write a script so that we would each month have a new script for anybody who wanted it all over the country. Well, it turned out that about 10% of the people we asked to write a script wrote them. And what happened, of course, was that Mr. Sears sat down at the typewriter and ended up writing the script at the last minute. And we had bought a great big duplicating machine that, of course, in those days was hand-run. And Bill Jr. was the one who ran it, but he had to crank these things out by hand to duplicate these scripts, and then we would mail them out. One day, just for fun, we said to Bill, what are you going to do when you get into the next world if you haven't done any teaching? And he said, oh, we said, well, I can answer that very easily. He said, when I get into the next world, all I'll have to do is say, go like that. And he'll say, go right in. One of the things that I would like you to give some thought to is entertaining children that has a quality of the faith within it. This is a very, very simple thing that I devised years ago. It's called Look for the Book. And all I did was put all these letters down, and what they have to do is find the 7 valleys, the Iqan, the Baha'i proofs, the Bab, Baha'i world faith, world order, and so on and so forth. Anybody could devise the same thing. It's a very simple thing. Making a crossword puzzle is a lot of fun, and that can be done on the just words and things within the faith. And there are a lot of ways that one can have games, devise games that are very interesting and entertaining for the children, and yet teach them various aspects of the Baha'i faith. And with a little imagination and a little effort, you can do that. If you would, yes, please.
I'd like to make a comment. As a young Baha'i married couple, not having a family yet, I think it would be very helpful if local assemblies would get together or groups would get together and put together workshops for Baha'is who are not married, who are young, that want to start looking into these questions. Because it's too late by the time you have a child.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
And it doesn't mean that you'll get all the ideas in your head, but we need to start developing those ideas, and without the tools, we can't.
You're absolutely right. Every local assembly should have classes for the youth to help them, first of all, to know how to decide, how to recognize characteristics in the people that they are interested in, to see whether these characteristics live up to the Baha'i teachings. I know that when I met Bill and we were just having dates together, I knew that his characteristics were characteristics that were spiritual. He wasn't interested in the faith at that particular point, but I knew it was only a matter of time because he was a good person. And if we are not able to be objective and see qualities in other people without a glossy, rosy glow intervening between that makes them look different than it is, it's too bad. Every assembly should have classes for their youth to help them in this respect. You're absolutely right. There is a large section of selections from the writings of Abdul-Baha on this subject, and most of these things are taken from that. I hope that you will study them very carefully because they are very, very interesting. And when you do, remember that in the Gleanings, for one book alone, Baha'u'llah wrote the words ponder, consider, think, meditate 95 times. In other words, don't just read, think about it, and then do something about it. We're going to close now. We have some readings that, Chris, are you ready? Yes, where's number 2? Who has number 2? Would you please come up? In fact, each one of you who has one of these, would you please come up so that they can be done in succession?
In every city and village, schools must be established, and every child in that city or village is to engage in study. It followeth that whatever soul shall offer his aid to bring this about will assuredly be accepted at the heavenly threshold and exalted by the company on high. As to the organization of the schools, if possible, the children should all wear the same kind of clothing, even if the fabric is varied. The more cleanly the pupils are, the better. Located in a place where the air is delicate and pure. Children must be trained to be most courteous and well-behaved, must be constantly encouraged and made eager to gain all the summits of human accomplishment, so that from their earliest years they will be taught to have high aims, to conduct themselves well, to be chaste, pure, undefiled, and will learn to be of powerful resolve and firm of purpose in all things. Let them not jest and trifle, but earnestly advance unto their goals.
Training in morals and good conduct is far more important than book learning. Encourage ye the school children from their earliest years to deliver speeches of high quality, so that in their leisure time they will engage in giving cogent and effective talks, expressing themselves with clarity and eloquence.
In a divine civilization, the individual is so conditioned that with no fear of punishment, he shunneth the perpetuation of crime, seeth the crime itself as the severest of torments, and with alacrity and joy setteth himself to acquire the virtues of humankind. Among the greatest of all services that can possibly be rendered by man to Almighty God is the education and training of children.
Say, let truthfulness and courtesy be your adorning. Suffer not yourselves to be deprived of the robe of forbearance and justice, that the sweet savors of holiness may be wafted from your hearts upon all created things. Say, beware, O people of Baha, lest you walk in the ways of them whose words differ from their deeds. Strive that ye may be enabled to manifest to the peoples of the earth the signs of God, and to mirror forth his commandments. Let your acts be a guide unto all mankind, for the professions of most men, be they high or low, differ from their conduct. It is through your deeds that ye can distinguish yourselves from others. Through them the brightness of your light can be shed upon the whole earth. Happy is the man that heedeth my counsel, and keepeth the precepts prescribed by him who is the all-knowing, the all-wise.
The beloved guardian was once asked, why is it saying when, in the writings? And he said, what this is God telling Baha'u'llah to say. And that is those are the words of Baha'u'llah that you have just heard. God telling him what to say. Thank you very much. It was lovely.